Hello, hello. Welcome to a tutorial breakdown of the character Nero from Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition. So my goal of this video is to help out new players. My previous video was aimed at players who know all the moves and know how to use Nero. So this is going to be a little lower level than that, in the sense that we're going to go over his basic moves and how to play and fight like Nero. If you are a fan of any form of fighting game, I find the Devil May Cry series lends heavily to the same ideas of combos and having a move list and knowing how to use them optimally together. And so I'm going to start off with, before I get into the move list, just kind of a quick breakdown of how you should be playing Nero as a character and how to use his tools the most optimally. Then we'll go over all of his moves. Then hopefully we'll have a nice little demonstration of some of these tactics. So the first thing to consider with Nero is Nero's kind of a brawler. His fighting style is that he hits very hard and likes to kind of be in the middle of the action. Because of this, a lot of his moves cover a lot of area. His sword, the Red Queen, has a lot of reach. And unlike Dante, which he tends to swing forward, a lot of Nero's moves will hit an area around him. Beyond that, Nero also has the Buster and his gun, the Blue Rose. His gun also functions as a very big area of effect attack, unless you're just spamming the bullets, which we will get into later. So that also benefits having enemies grouped up. And his Buster is his main single target, kind of like, if you're going to take one demon out, it's going to be with the Buster. So very quickly, we're going to talk about his movement options before we get into his weapons. So Nero doesn't have a lot of movement options, to be honest. He's got his regular jump, he's got a double jump, both of which are pretty essential as they both... I believe the first jump offers a dodge. I think the second one does as well, but I tend not to rely on it as much. Much like if you played any game with a double jump, once you use that second jump, you're kind of stuck. The only way around that is to jump off of the enemy, which resets your double jumps and your calibers, which we'll once again get to after. But once you use that second jump, you're kind of dead in the air. So if you are trying to avoid enemies and get some space, try not to use that double jump until you're don't just do that. You want to get as much air and then at the last moment use it again to get as much horizontal distance away from enemies. Other than that, Nero has the standard dodge, which is jump and to the side while locking on. I don't really tend to use this as much just because a lot of Devil May Cry's combat involves just not being in the vicinity of your opponent's attacks, unless you're trying to dodge on purpose for style, and honestly, that's the only reason. Dodging is slow, it kind of repositions you, whereas if you just get out of the way or shuffle or something and counterattack, you'll be just in a better position. As for his other movement options, on the ground you have Streak, which can get you some distance towards, to chase an enemy down, or if you charge it up all the way, it'll give you a lot of distance. But it's kind of messy since you do have to lock on, so you have to careen towards an enemy, so it kind of can put you in a bad position. Same thing with caliber there. It'll give you some horizontal distance in the air, and it's the only way, in a controlled manner, to get Nero from one place to another without using his grab attack, honestly, which kind of works with heavier enemies to pull you towards him. But otherwise, Nero doesn't have a lot of options. He can go up and down with his sword attacks, which we'll get into in a second. But otherwise, you're kind of stuck where you are as Nero. You have to get really used to fighting what's around you first before moving on, or just being constantly on the move. He can't teleport like Dante or Virgil. He can't... I don't know, he can't fly or anything. I don't think anyone flies in this game, but in the previous games you can, and perhaps in the future games. He doesn't have a motorcycle, as will become relevant in Devil May Cry 5. So really with Nero, you have to kind of deal with what you've got. So let's go over his weapons real quickly. First, let's go over his gun, because it has only like 3 moves. The blue rose is Nero's revolver. You can quick fire like this, and you shouldn't. The only reason you should ever quick fire is to stay in the air, as it does slow your descent. Not for long, but it does slow for a little bit. You can do it for style reasons to hold an enemy in the air, but really, you shouldn't. What makes the blue rose powerful is its charge attack, like that. It's got 3 levels, which is the first. The second one takes about a second later with purple. And the third one, you have to hold it a bit longer than that once it's red, and you're good to go. So you want to be using Nero's red charge, the full charge, as much as possible. And just keeping it charged while you do other attacks, and then when you're ready, releasing it, is the ideal way to use Nero's blue rose. So the way the red charge works is that when it hits an enemy, it'll explode, and then it'll keep a delayed explosion on them for a few seconds. I think 3 to 5. I could be wrong. And once that timer's up, the delayed explosion will go off, and that one will further knock back. I think the delayed explosion does more damage than the initial explosion. Right now, I don't have a target to show that with, but we'll get to that soon. So you want to kind of use that on enemies that have a lot of health, or you want them to get like really far away, because the initial hit will knock them back, and the second hit will either knock them up or further back again. Kind of the interesting play, like if you want to do some complicated stuff with Nero's blue rose, is on level 3 charge, you can hit him once and then use your grab and buster to kind of reposition the enemy among other enemies. So that secondary explosion will cause more damage to more demons. The last other thing about this is if you hit someone with a charged shot and the delayed trigger goes, sets up, if you kill that demon for any reason, the explosion will go off immediately. I'm pretty sure it's the same with Dante's Lucifer pins, and the main idea with that is just a little more control of when the explosion goes off. That's it for Blue Rose. We'll do the Buster as well, because once again, it's got very few moves. In fact, it only has 2. You've got this grab, and you've got the Buster itself. This grab, which its name escapes me. I made sure to check up all the names for sword attacks, but I did not remember this one. Light demons will come towards you. It's not a size thing, it's a weight thing, because the mega scarecrows are pretty light, so they get pulled to you immediately. But the armored enemies, the blitz, all bosses except for Dante, I think that's it. But you will be pulled towards them as opposed to them being pulled to you. I get some people might find that useful. If you've ever played DMC Devil May Cry, you've got like the angel pulls and devil pulls, which were kind of inspired by Nero's move. That one's really good because you get to control whether or not you pull them or you get to pull to them. With Nero, it's really useful to pull your enemies towards you, and it's much less useful to pull yourself towards your enemies because it's kind of erratic. And when you get pulled to an enemy, you just fly in a direction, and it's not really going to set you up as nicely as you'd want. The Buster is your finisher move. It will take a demon, and Nero will do kind of like a quick cutscene of him beating them up, and it'll give you a lot of trigger. It'll give you a lot of style, and often will set you up to, like, in a good position. If you can Buster in the air, it's always more powerful. It does more damage, and for a lot of them leaves you in the air, which is really useful as you can continue with some space between you and your enemies. The only enemy you should absolutely never buster, well, I say this, but I recently posted the Bloody Palace video where I did do this a few times, but the assaults, which are the lizard demons, you don't want to buster them because Nero will drop to the ground with them, even if you're in the air, and just slam them back and forth like a ragdoll. But during this, unlike a lot of the other enemies, he's very bustering other enemies. He's very vulnerable, and often the time it takes to do this buster, you're going to get hit. So be careful with that. Other enemies like the frosts, which Nero does a wind up, like spinning and throwing them, even that can be done in the air for extra safety. The last thing about the Buster is that you can use Buster with Devil Trigger and it'll just do more. If you're spinning an enemy, you'll spin them harder. If you're smashing an enemy on the ground, he'll smash them a few extra times. Interestingly, for the lighter enemies, if you Buster them in the air with Devil Trigger, Nero will bounce them so hard that they will come back up to meet him, kind of like a basketball, which is fun. Okay, with those out of the way, let's get to the meat of Nero's moves, which is the Red Queen. I'm just going to stop charging for this. So the Red Queen is Nero's sword, and unlike Dante, who gets a lot of demon arms like to do main attacks with, this is Nero's main combat tool. And so you're going to want to get as good as you can with it. So if you play Devil May Cry and you learn all the attacks and you just start swinging them out, you might realize a lot of the times you're going to be knocking enemies back, away from you, or you'll be noticing some attacks just don't do as much damage. So I'm gonna break down the attacks on how useful they are, and if they are a combo ender, I will say something about that, because not all attacks can be followed up cleanly. So really quickly, because I've gone over it before, is the Exceed system. Nero's sword has a motorcycle engine thing attached to it, and you can rev that to increase his attacks. That's when you can see it in effect as his sword glows red, and the attacks come out quicker, and they will do more damage. The ideal way to rev and keep your Exceed trigger, your Exceed slots, I don't actually know what to call them, you're going to want to use the Exceed button, which I have on this keyboard as Q. You want to use it right as Nero is in the height of, well, maybe not the height, or like the point his sword hits the enemy. So the apex point of his swing, if that makes sense to you. If you just grab a Scarecrow in like one of the easier modes, and every time you hit them, you hit Q, you'll find the rhythm. I can't always do it. I think it's okay if you can't always do it. Nero has a lot of different attacks with a lot of different arcs, and a lot of these arcs change from when you have Exceed and when you don't. High Roller, for example. Let me try to get there. That's a bad example. Let me get rid of those. Yeah. So High Roller, when you have the Exceed, has a different animation than when you don't. So it's actually a different time, even though it's the same attack. So learning Nero's Exceeds on all of his attacks, honestly, is a little time consuming, but after a while you'll kind of get a good vibe of it, and you'll be able to do it through muscle memory. I said this also in my Bloody Palace Nero video, but any attack that Nero has that does 2 hits, let me find one, like Caliber with Exceed, or his combo B, like that last one's, you want to use his Exceed rev at the end of the second one. I can never get that one. There we go. On demand, but there it is. Alright, so really quickly, let's go through his combos. So Nero's ground combos, you're going to be using one more than any other. But here they are, with just in order of what they're called, which they're just called A, B, C, D. Which isn't too helpful, but that's what we have to work with. So Nero's combo A is just what happens when you spam the attack button. If you're a new player, you are doing this combo constantly. In the first level, they give you the tutorial and they just tell you to do this. That last hit will knock your enemies back, and oftentimes you don't want to go that far. That's a different one, I'll get back to that one, but let me just keep spamming. It's really not good. It moves Nero forward slightly, and that last hit kind of only hits in front of him. Honestly, you won't be using this much as you get better. As you get better, there are better combos to do. I'm going to skip to the Red Queen combo D, because it's the same thing and I accidentally showed it, where you go 1, 2, 3, whoops, 1, 2, 3, and then a pause, and then you hit the last one. It's exactly the same as the regular one, except for the last hit is a little more powerful. That's the other reason you will never use combo A, because combo D is the same thing. It's a fraction slower and does a little more damage. However, it suffers from the exact same problem, that it ends with a combo ender without doing too much damage. Let's go... I'm doing these out of order. I know I said we'd go over order, but really I don't think the lettering is what you'll remember. It's more how it works. So the next one I'm going to teach you guys is just his jab, like his repeated jab, which happens with when you use the attack, pause, and then you just keep spamming it. During this attack, Nero is rather vulnerable, so you want to use it only when Nero's alone, or there's just one enemy left, or all the other enemies are far away. It doesn't do as much damage as you'd like it to do, and its length is dependent almost entirely on how fast you can spam the button. Yeah, and exceeding this attack is very hard, though it is very... yeah, I can't even hit one. It's very hard, and it's worth it because he does a lot of damage with this exceeded, but it's very hard to do. If you ever get his super costume, you can just do it freely to get an idea of how powerful it is, which is very powerful. But you want to be using this when there's one enemy and you have time to do this. If you don't do anything after the final hit, Nero does this pose, which is pretty neato, but doesn't give you anything else. So the last Red Queen combo on the ground, which is the most important one, I believe it's combo B, I could be wrong, but it is the area of effect one. So it's going to be attack twice, pause, and then you just keep spamming. So just like all the others, the last hit where Nero falls and leans on his right hand is going to be a knockback, but everything, all of these hits up to that, like all of those, will hold the enemy there, which means you can hit them as much as you can and they won't move, and then you can follow it up. So whenever you have a second, and whenever you're on the ground, whenever you're surrounded by enemies, frankly, whenever you just want to start throwing out hits to do damage, you should be doing this combo. Even that's far enough. If you're going to do 4 of the hits, that's more than enough, because you're hitting everyone around you. With Devil Trigger, it does even more damage. That is, if you're practicing with Nero, start all your combos there. Alright, so on the ground we have 2 more. Also, actually I should speak. This attack is not that bad to, let me see if I can get it to exceed the whole thing. The rhythm is pretty like standard through it, so it is the easier one to exceed as well, which all in all makes it the most attractive ground combo. So Nero has 3 more ground attacks with Red Queen. Streak, High Roller, and Shuffle. So Streak is the one that everyone who starts the game will spam, and I don't blame you because I did as well. And Streak is just the forward dash attack at your enemies. So you're holding down lock on, forward, and the sword. So Streak is good, except for there's a knockback. So Streak should only really be used as a method of closing distances. And I'm trying to show off all of the different levels of Streak. The higher level exceed you have, the further Nero will go and how many spins he will do. But no matter how how many levels, no matter what you do, that last hit is going to knock enemies back. So if you're trying to combo someone and they're not a boss, streak is really bad. You'll cover distance, which is good, but at the end of it, your enemies are going to be knocked away. So then you have to start again and pick them back up. So Exceed is really good in going into a crowd of enemies, and then you can jump, grab, and move on. But otherwise, I wouldn't use it. The other problem is it's very hard to combo into because you'll have to knock your enemy to the ground. You can buster them down, fall down, and then streak. But it's the same problem as that's a lot of setup with little payoff. So I would generally use streak as a movement option, as a way to get Nero from like one place to another. It is also very, very easy to exceed streak because of the nature of like the wide swing and the timing, because you get used to how far Nero travels, so you know around the time he's going to stop, and so it's easier to time it based off that. Nero's other attack before I get to High Roller is Shuffle. I'm just gonna get rid of that. So Shuffle is Nero's counterattack, and you hold lock on and you wiggle back to forth and attack, back to forward and attack. This is kind of tricky for new players. It took me a while to get used to it, and I'm on keyboard, which makes it even easier, and that's on me. But Shuffle is a fantastic attack. First thing about Shuffle is when Nero's moving back, he is invulnerable. So if you're about to take an attack, you have that brief time to dodge it. So it does literally dodge attacks. This can be any attack. It can be a wide slash, a narrow slash that actually goes as far back as Nero does. He will still dodge it. The other thing that makes Shuffle exceedingly good is the damage it does. Oops. There we go. Shuffle does a lot of damage, and when you have it exceeded, it does even more damage. The 2 hits are fantastic. It holds enemies there for a very long time, especially level 3. If you can use that mainly against assaults, armored Angelos and things like that, you will be wrecking them. It also has a very wide, you can see it, especially on the 3rd, a very wide reach. So it'll be hitting a lot of enemies if they're clustered together. And if you're waiting for them to get too close, you can literally start off with the dodge in order to make sure you don't get hit for the rest of it. So yes, when to use that, Shuffle is really good. If you knock someone in the air, you can follow it up with a Shuffle really easily, and they'll get hit on the way down. But it is a combo ender in a lot of ways. You can definitely go like that in order to get a good little combo on enemies and knock them back. It knocks them back pretty far, especially if they're in the air. So the last grounded attack Red Queen has is High Roller. And High Roller is Nero's high time. So it's hold down lock, attack while holding back. If you hold the button, Nero will go up with the enemy, which is what you usually want to do, but there is some occasions you might want to jump up manually, or if you throw him back and follow it up with a Shuffle. The big thing about High Roller is that as you get Exceed, let me just try to grab that Exceed. Let's just show the 3rd one because it is the flashiest. Nero gets extra spins, which when you hold it, get extra height. So the more Exceed, the more height you have. If you just use a high-level Exceed on the ground, a high-level High Roller on the ground without following it, it's just extra swings. I don't know how often you'll do that. That can be used as a dispersal tactic if you have a lot of enemies around and you just need them to be away from you. That's an effective way to like knock them back and move on. Actually, that's exactly how I would treat it. If you're using High Roller on the ground, it's because you want your enemies away from you, and that's it. If you want to take one enemy away, hold it down, and take them all the way up. Let me try to show you a level 2 so you can see the height. So the exceed hit, like high roller exceeded 3 gives you a lot of one-on-one time with an enemy because you're pretty much the height of a double jump. In fact, some of the puzzles, I believe, in the like hidden orbs or blue orbs in the storyline for Nero can only be achieved by doing that. An exceed 3 high roller followed by a double jump. So high roller is your main combo extender. After you knock people around on the ground, you want to take them in the air in order to continue it. And it's the most common way to like isolate an enemy. The alternative is to jump up and grab your enemy and pull them up, but I mean high roller does damage. You can get more exceed off of it, and it gets you style and triggers, so definitely be using that. I think that's it for high roller. You're going to find yourself using it a lot, and all of the exceed timing for each one is drastically different, mainly because of the added difference, like... That's fine. The added differences between the spins. Just remember, because it is a multi-spin attack, that you only want to press the exceed button on the last one. Yeah, I find it hard to get the level 3 exceed on any given high roller just because there's so much difference between them. But just practice. Alright, so let's take a look at Nero's air attacks with Red Queen. So the first combo, I believe, is just the air combo. Actually, before we go too far into this, I mentioned this in the Bloody Palace video, but I'll mention it here as well. When Nero does attacks in the air with the exceed, he falls faster. It's not about revving it. Actually, I don't know. I don't know if you rev it, you fall faster as well. Let's see. Oops. No, you seem to be pretty much the same. But using exceed attacks in the air makes Nero fall faster. I think this is just to balance it out, to add an extra level of difficulty. But it's something you'll get used to, and really only applies to roulette spin, which we'll get to in a second. So the regular air combo is this 3-hit, with the 3rd hit knocking the enemy down. You will almost never use this unless for some reason you just want an enemy out of the way, and then jump off of them, I would say. Because after the 3rd hit, you have a brief time that you can jump off of the enemy to get away. Otherwise, it's a combo ender, and what it'll do, it'll just get you up there and end the combo there. The main attack you're going to be doing in the air as Nero is high roller, and I would argue it is Nero's best move. It is so good, in fact, that Virgil got it, and it continues to be an incredibly powerful tool in Virgil's hands. So in order to use high roller, you're going to swing twice, pause, and swing a 3rd time. On that 3rd attack, Nero is going to gain some height somehow, because that's how physics works. Who am I kidding? It's Devil May Cry. On that 3rd attack, Nero is going to gain some height and multi-hit the opponent. So this is fantastic for a number of reasons, but the most important is that you can follow it up with a double jump and do it again, or you can grab the enemy, or you can buster. It does a ton of damage. Whoops. It does a ton of damage, and it is flashy. It is weird to time the exceed at first, because if you see, his sword kind of like the after image of his sword makes a whole circle around him. So it's weird to time. Let me try to... Yeah. It's weird to time without an enemy. When there's an enemy, I find I get it a lot. There we go. But I don't know exactly how to tell you how to visualize it, because the timing is really weird. But once you start using high roller a lot, not high roller. What did I just call this thing? Roulette spin. Once you start using roulette spin a lot, you're gonna get used to the timing as you see the enemies get hit, and you're gonna be able to exceed off of it. So any combo with Nero, if you get him in the air, oops, that was a bad example. If you get him in the air, hit him with a roulette spin almost 100% of the time. It's going to give you a little more time in the air. It's going to do a lot of damage. It's going to be great for everyone. Nero has 2 more attacks in the air. We'll go with double down or split. This is double down. This is split. They're the same attack. It's lock on forward attack in the air. And it is your air finisher in a lot of ways. Well, it's your air to ground finisher. So the way you want to use this is when you don't have any exceed, split hits in front of you. When you have exceed, double down hits around you. Even with lower exceed, it's still... Let me just get the level 2. It still hits a nice area around you. Honestly, I find myself more using this attack to get to the ground quickly. If you, for some reason, are up in the air and you need to get down for any reason, that's what you're going to use. Even if you use a buster on your enemy, knock them down, sometimes it's faster just to double down and go right down there and meet them on the ground. You can follow a roulette spin up with split or double down, and it's good, but more often or not, you're going to want a buster or shoot. Those are your 2 main combo enders in the air, or caliber. But it is a good technique to get to the ground. It's a good way to hit a group of enemies below Nero by positioning him and then landing on them. And for what it's worth, it is, especially when you're getting used to it, it is very easy to build exceed triggers, exceed bars, or what have you. Except for I'm not doing it off of double down. Also, really importantly, I would say that how do I put this? That you can do this rather low to the ground. You don't have to get that high up. Once you get used to it and set up the attack like that, you can use it as a ground attack. This is particularly effective if you're trying to combo enemies and not get, hold on, sorry. Like that. And not wanting to send them in the air, but to knock them back, as it doesn't have the time, like the wind up that shuffle does. It doesn't move you like streak does, so you can use it as a quick ender when you're on the ground. But it has to be, it definitely has to be exceeded to work properly. Otherwise, the regular split is just not as good. Nero's last attack in the air is the Caliber, which is Nero's most powerful attack, I believe. The perks of the Caliber are very evident immediately. I should say how it's done. You just like it's shuffle in the air. You jump in the air, you hold lockdown, move back and forward, and attack. The first bonus of this is that you get some distance immediately. You can only caliber once in the air. Even if I put you'll get a split usually after that, unless you mess up the inputs. Yeah. The only way to continue using calibers in the air is you want to jump off an enemy. And this is very effective on bosses like Burial or Dagon. Or actually, Achinda. Any boss that has the girth, I would say, that you can like bounce off of them while hitting them with the full might of Caliber. So Caliber is very, very good at finishing air combos when you want the demon as far away from you at the end as possible. A very effective way to do that is you can buster them to the ground, use your Blue Rose 3 to knock them back up, and then hit them with a Caliber. That wasn't Caliber, but you get the idea. So let me see if I can show you the 3 levels of Caliber. So that's Caliber 1, or just Caliber, I guess. This is Caliber exceeded once. This is Caliber exceeded twice. And the one, if you can get good enough that you can manage to like purposely exceed 3, the 3rd level caliber. Each of them send you a little further away, like give you more distance, but it's not very noticeable, to be honest. I think that's it for caliber. There is one puzzle that you're going to have to know how to use caliber properly. I believe it's on the waterfall in the first part of Nero's campaign, where you're going to want to caliber, double jump, and then grab for a blue orb. But, I mean, I'm sure there's tutorials for that if you'd like. That's pretty much Nero's Red Queen. The last thing about Nero is his Devil Trigger. And his Devil Trigger works kind of differently in a few ways from the other Devil Triggers. First thing about Nero's Devil Trigger is on startup there's an explosion, like that. And you can do this as many times as you want, but it also eats up your Devil Trigger as much, like like 2 or 3 orbs, I believe. So that attack, when he reaches up, it's a knockback to all the demons around you, but it also makes Nero invulnerable for a few seconds. If you saw my Bloody Palace video, you'll see that I advocated as a way to stop combos against humanoid characters and humanoid bosses, but also as a method to dodge attacks like Burial's huge explosion. Some of Dagon's attacks can be stopped by using that. And I believe at one point I mentioned in the video, but I'll mention it here again, if you're doing a ground combo, you can switch into Devil Trigger and just repeat the combo, as it'll stun everyone around you and allow you to restart. It basically doubles up your ground combos if you start it halfway through. I don't have unlimited Devil Trigger right now because I didn't put on the super costume. I was considering it, but I thought it doesn't matter that much. When Nero uses his Devil Trigger, a ghost aura person, not Virgil, appears behind him and will mimic his moves with greater effect with Yamato. Basically, it's a second hit. It doesn't interrupt your hits. All of your attacks work as intended, even if they don't look like they do. For example, if I remember correctly, even when you use Double Down, the Devil Trigger Spirit, his sword comes out as if you're using split, as in it's forward and not stabbing down, but it doesn't make any difference in the attack. The knockback is the same, if not more. But like in the same directions as Double Down would be. Then I can show you there's 2 other Devil Trigger attacks. This one I'll show you. It's, so the Devil Trigger special attacks are used by holding lock on and forward or back with both Red Queen and Buster buttons at the same time. So his back one is this charge up X attack. I charge it up. You can just use it right away to let it go and it'll fire faster. That's mainly kind of a crowd clearing attack. It's a really good attack to finish a combo on. And that's how I would use it almost 100% of the time. But otherwise, I don't know. It takes a little bit of a startup, so I would wait for a moment that you feel the most comfortable with. So now I've been doing this inside Mission 19, which I recommend if you don't have the debug mode, as a method of, honestly, of practicing against the bosses on the hardest difficulty, on Dante Must Die difficulty. But also because it's a pretty place to do things, and I can trigger some demons to come down in a second to just show off some of the things I've been talking about. I'm just trying to think if I'm forgetting anything. As said before in my other video, if you start running with Nero and Taunt, he will do this kick attack. I don't think it's particularly useful because once there's enemies around, it takes a long time to get Nero to start running. So either you have to come into a battle running and then start it off with this, which is pretty sweet, or you're going to have to ignore all of the demons, run in a circle around them strafing until he goes into his running posture and then just use it. As for taunting itself, if you haven't played this game or if you're new at this game and you don't taunt, you need to get into taunting. If you're going to do a combo that ends without knocking enemies too far back, For example, a ground... Oops, I don't want him to hit that yet. For example, a ground combo that ends with high roller like that, you can follow it up very easily with a taunt here. The taunt will boost your... Oops. Oh well. It'll boost your... Yeah, that's fine. It'll boost your style ranking quite a bit, and... Oh, okay. It'll boost your style ranking quite a bit, and it will also, after that, give you some Devil Trigger. You gotta get used to doing that after combos to maximize their effectiveness and maximize the amount of time you're in Devil Trigger. So let's see, we got 2. If I remember, 2 comes after 5. If you haven't figured out how this dice works, if you hit the die the second the number shows up, which I recommend knowing which number comes up before. Okay, it's after 4. You will solve this every time. I remember when I first played this game and I was just randomly hitting it because I assumed it was random as dice work. It is not, and you can breeze through these areas a lot easier. So I hit it on 2, it's going to be 2, and hopefully it's going to spawn some demons. So we can show off some of the things. What do we got? Okay, we got these guys. They're not ideal, but we can combo them down. Oops, that's on me. So these guys are going to be on Dante Must Die difficulty. So when you get them on the ground, yeah, they're not that good because by the time they come down, they're already damaged. But it's the same thing. Pull them towards you, start your ground combo, put them in the air, roulette, grab, buster, and then if they're still alive, hit them with the charge shot. Let's see if we can get a better example. We're looking for 1, which comes after 5. I'm hoping for Scarecrow, or I guess Assault would be fine, but... Perfect, Scarecrow. So... And these guys. We're going to try to actually get rid of these guys. Oops. Just because I don't want to have to deal with both of them. So let's see if we can get some Nero combos going. Just basic stuff that can teach you. So as usual, you can see how much those attacks hit groups around Nero. And that's why I recommend using them the most. These guys are going to go in Devil Trigger, and they're going to be a little trickier, but... Alright. Launch them. Grab them. Buster. Fire. I'll try to show a few more examples. Like that would be using split or double down in the middle of a ground combo to maximize that. I'll just finish him off. And this guy over here, oh, he's not going to last long, but yeah. We'll see if we can trigger another one, which would be 3. Yeah, got it. This is fun because I've never actually aimed to do this on purpose. The Angels are good because you're going to mostly want to be using ground combos on them in the first place, as they will expose their vulnerable back. Oops. I need you guys to spread apart a little bit. There we go. Alright, well that one didn't work, but we'll try him. As you can see, when Nero pulls himself to them, it's not very good at kind of like aiming where you're going to be. That's my fault. And here I'm going to show you, once I can get this guy's shield down. Oops. Nero's final Devil Trigger attack, which you will use very, very rarely as a finisher, as it is very hard to successfully use without getting hit because it has a long wide-up. I need you to put your shield up. Alright, well, that one didn't work. Oh. Well, that's it for that. We're just gonna let the game decide what's going on. I guess here I can show you a bit of boss tactics for Caliber, because it's definitely the place you're going to want to be using it. So you're going to want to try to use Caliber onto them. I'm going to wait for him to turn around, actually. And as soon as you do, jump off of him go. And you can follow it up with another one just like that. And I died, but that's fine. So the main thing to take away from Nero, as I go back to the main menu, is that Nero's at his best taking on groups of enemies or singling them out. He's not so good at getting around the battlefield. You kind of have to deal with what you got when you see him. Let's put him in the super costume so I can show off the devil trigger a little bit. But that's really it. Learn to Buster, learn to Exceed. As I said in my Bloody Pals video, learning to Exceed is like the first thing you gotta do with Nero. By the way, if you have the super costume, he exceeds to 3 every time, which actually makes him kind of unwieldy to use, because no matter what, he does the full streak and the full caliber, so you gotta get used to that. Plus, I don't think the super costumes, like, I don't know a lot of people who enjoy using them. I think they're just meant to be silly when you want to just kill things, but then again, I think that's the purpose of Heaven and Hell mode. But as you can see now, the Spectre will like follow up a lot of his attacks and just make them do more damage. The visual thing is cool, but you don't really need to treat them as different attacks. So that's it. That's it for Nero. After this, I'm hoping to move on to Dante and set up... I think I'm going to go through his attacks first before setting up his Bloody Palace video, but if you're new with Dante, or if you're new with Nero, either way, I hope that these videos help and you can learn the character and get into it. I love Devil May Cry, I love Devil May Cry 4, and I hope if you enjoy them, you'll enjoy these videos, you'll play them and enjoy them, and maybe get hype for Devil May Cry 5. Alright, until then, see you next time.